Assalamu alaikum. I hope you have been well. Today I wanted to share some solid advice from my converts and reverts, and perhaps even born Muslims could benefit from this. So when I first reverted, I made the mistake of taking a born Muslim's word above, what I knew or what I thought about Islam from, what I'd studied. And I think this is a tendency for a lot of reverts because naturally you feel, well, they've been practicing for so much longer than me, so obviously they probably have more information and there's some reason why they're doing whatever it is they've advised you to do. Bad practice, because Muslims are just people in the end, and once you start really understanding Islam and the diversity within the communities, the varying communities that make up the Muslim Ummah, you understand that there are multiple answers to many different issues. And that's because we have such a strong tradition of logical debate and fact-finding and accuracy. This is like one thing that Muslims are pretty stringent about, right? So you have to do your reading yourself, and you always want to ask for a reference for something, especially something that's making you uncomfortable. For instance, I remember when I had first reverted and I had some people in my life who were resistant to Islam. They paraded around hadiths that, me being in my infancy of faith didn't understand that they were not authentic hadiths. And so I was a little taken aback by this. But alhamdulillah, it made me research and understand that. So I'd like to give you what I learned so you don't have to go through the turmoil that I went through in the meantime, before I understood some basic things. So the Qur'an is your foundation for this house that you're going to build of your faith, right? And the best way for you to increase your faith and connect with Allah is to read it and understand it. Now, I've seen a lot of reverts say, oh, but I don't have a Quran, or I don't have access to a Quran. If you're watching this video, there is an amazing site called Qur'an.com that has a digital version where you can not only search what you're looking for by like topic or verse, but you can also have it read to you, so you can listen to the recitation while you're reading either the English or the Arabic to try to familiarize yourself with it. And not only that, it gives you multiple translations. The best translations that we have available in the whole entire world are compiled on this site under each verse. So you might have like 4 or 5 options to pick from. And I like to read them all because, not being perfect in Arabic, you can garner a nuanced understanding of each verse. And what's more is you can also hover your mouse over specific Arabic words if you want to understand more why the translation has been put together in such a way. And so it really gives you that opportunity to appreciate the words of the Quran. And in doing so, understand more, right? So once you familiarize yourself with the Quran and understand the general themes in it, then it is easier for you to move on to things like hadith and Sharia law and fiqh and all that stuff. But before doing that, so you've laid your foundation of your house with reading the Quran and familiarizing yourself with that. Next is going to be some biographies of the Prophet Muhammad, peace be upon him. And I like to make it an annual practice. Now, I'm not saying it always has been an annual practice, But I think by reading a different biography of the Prophet Muhammad at least once a year, first of all, you're reminding yourself, because, you know, we have a lot going on in our lives, and it's easy to forget or disconnect when we don't have that knowledge fresh in our minds. And you'll also get different pieces of the story from different biographers, because obviously the Prophet Muhammad's life, peace be upon him, was so profound that you can't include everything in a biography, especially one that's going to be palatable for, let's say, Western readers. So the first one I ever read was by Karen Armstrong, and it was called Muhammad, a Prophet for Our Time. I highly recommend that to kind of cut your baby teeth on. And then the one I just finished, which had so many beautiful reminders in it, was In the Footsteps of the Prophet by TRIPP Ramadan. And these are well-known and learned scholars. So by familiarizing yourself with these, you're going to get a general sense of Islam, right? So first the Qur'an, and the Qur'an's general theme is, for me at least, God is merciful, you know, Al-Rahman Al-Rahim, which is just hammered throughout the whole book, and compassionate. And God does not intend hardship in your religion. God intends ease for you, right? The Quran tells us this itself. And then when you supplement that with the Prophet Muhammad's life, peace be upon him, you realize how gentle and beautiful and merciful the religion really is. And so it's really important to keep those points in your mind when you move on to the next field of study, which is Hadith. So I can give you another wonderful site that we have available to us now that makes the Bukhari Hadith collection, which is like the most authentic Hadith collection that we have, available to you in digital format. And again, you can search and you can cross-reference, and it's a wonderful resource. What are Hadith? Hadith are simply sayings or recollections of the Prophet Muhammad, peace be upon him, by the companions. Now, you can see how this is a little bit more problematic than the straight up reading of the Quran, because we know, and no one's going to contest, that the Quran are the actual words of God as revealed through the angel Jibreel to the Prophet Muhammad, peace be upon him. No two Muslims are going to disagree on this. Where Muslims do tend to disagree are, first of all, the authenticity of the Hadith, although there is like a majority of scholars who see the Bukhari collection as like the next most authentic book to the Quran. So Bukhari started gathering his book at the age of 23. It is suspected that it took him about 16 years to compile it. And then after he had compiled it, he had his teachers, one of them Ibn Hanbal, who was very famous, check it, right? And this was about 200 years after the Prophet Muhammad's death, peace be upon him. The total number of hadith in this book are 7,563, but only 2,600, give or take, are present, you know, without repetition. So you have the same hadith with multiple recollections, and so there might be a word used here and not used there, or there might be more information in one version of the hadith. With hadith, though, you have to be very careful, because you have to understand the speech of the Prophet, peace be upon him, and the environment in which these were revealed. And there are all sorts of nuanced things that you have to take into account, because while some are literal, you know, others are metaphorical, and it really takes studying to understand that. So don't take it at its face value. And if it's causing you some sort of friction or some sort of cognitive dissonance where you're like, but you know, the Quran says this, and this hadith seems to be pointing to this. If you get stuck in there, you know, research, find a scholar who can explain it in a way that it makes sense to you in terms of coming back in line with what you know about the Quran and Islam. And then, you know, more complicated even than reading through these hadith, you get the Sharia law and fiqh, which, you know, dictate certain issues that are gray areas. And I feel like a lot of scholars will admit it. Any scholar worth his salt will preface anything with, that's a hot topic issue, such as like, okay, is music haram? Or, you know, they love to bring up the apostasy hadith, and all sorts of different issues. Any scholar worth his salt is going to tell you, you know, this is what I've extrapolated from my knowledge and how I'm understanding this hadith, what context I can put it into. And you have such a wide variety and rainbow of scholarly opinions that really you can find one that makes sense to you and go with it. Because that's one of the most beautiful things about Islam, is the diversity it allows. Islam has like this general framework for us, but then we can superimpose it on ourselves, on our individualistic ways, right? And make it work. So, and it's allowed. It's part of the historical Islamic tradition. You know, different peoples from different places incorporate things like the hijab and what kind of entertainment is allowed and norms of prayer, even the call to prayer. Some communities find the elaborate, ornate calls to prayer as, I don't want to call it haram, but you know, it's frowned upon. And others take the azan or the call to prayer as an art form. And, you know, you can hear some really beautiful recitations and calls to prayer in places like Egypt and Turkey. So what's the point, right? So in this whole long diatribe, I've been trying to point out the fact that Islam is diverse, and as a revert or a convert, you have to understand that. The other little thing I wanted to touch on in this video is the changing of names or getting an Islamic name after you convert, which is totally unnecessary. Of course you can, you have that choice, and you know, I always respect somebody's choice. But I think it takes away from the diversity of the community when we all change to Islamic names, and then we all go and try to get a jilbab and, you know, try to place uniformity where there's never going to be, because we're human beings, right? And it's part of the beauty. It's part of the majesty of creation, is this diversity. So it's unnecessary to change your name, and what's more is I would encourage you not to, because it's really important that we also have, you know, the, I don't know, Bobs and Marias and whatever your name is, as part of our community, so that it gets normalized that no, Islam is an international religion. It's not just like Laylas and Muhammads and Abdullahs. No, we have to normalize that Katie is just, could be a Muslim just like Thomas could, right? So, well, that's my advice for you. Build your Islamic framework and become the best version of yourself. There's no need to obliterate who you were or where you came from to become a Muslim. You can perfectly incorporate many facets of yourself within an Islamic framework. So for sure, it's an interesting journey. It's a lifelong journey, and we're all striving to do our best. I hope any of the information or advice that I've given in this video will help someone out there. Always wishing you what is better. Assalamu alaikum.